largely sort of addressed. So I'm just going to address it to the panel and anyone who wants to follow up. And I think that this issue is somewhat correlated. With the need to have a credible guide in the wilderness of the internet, there's much talk of the assertion of the expert, but is it the same expert? Does that touch on it a little bit? I know that Peter wants to get into this.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one key thing to remember here is in what's happening with Twitter and Facebook and social networks and all of the new trends. And next year, when we're here, there'll be new names and so forth. Is that one of the things that's changing is the form in which the communication is coming across. So it used to be print, newspapers, magazines, books, something tangible. That form is changing. So that form is now taking on, on your cell phone with Twitter. It can be on a social network. But I think still the very basics of what we're trying to do, what the expert is trying to do, is still relay the same kind of information about a book. It's just happening in a different format now. It's being structured in databases, on websites, and is interactive. And so that with this new tool, new things can happen. But I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that what people are still looking for is for information about books. That's what they're really looking for. And in book reviews, that can have many different forms as well. So there's book reviews, which are done by experts and bloggers. There's also the social platform, which is another way of engaging in books, but it's not necessarily book reviews. So there's a lot of things happening in the space that are not just necessarily book reviews. When you're online, you have a lot of other options as far as engaging in multimedia and audio and video. There's just simply more things to do out there. We're just learning how to use those tools right now. And to a large degree, I think, on this frontier we're talking about, some of the less experienced people are some of the first to go out and try these things, because there's really not a sustainable financial model out there yet to really support the experts. So there's a transition happening there where a lot of the people who are some of the first to go out and try some of these new tools are not necessarily the people who know the most about what they're talking about. And that transition is going to happen over time, where there is a financial model created, and that's not going to happen overnight or by next year either. But it will be there, and that will eventually, when we get to the point that all these new tools are really being utilized by people whose authority is respected, whatever that means. Whoever is able to connect with an audience, to create a brand, to create a style. Those are the people who will, be most suited to use these new tools. That's all they really are, is new tools.
Oh, I just wanted to add to that we talked about the difference between a recommendation and a review. And then there's, of course, a whole spectrum of those. There's you have on the one hand a very involved academic consideration of an entire body of work, and then on the other end, somebody just pointing or not pointing at a title and saying, go buy or do not go buy. And when I was in college, I had two friends, and they had different styles of making this recommendation, which I think later, as I thought about how technology has changed this in blogs, I think it's sort of divided into these two. I had one friend who would tell me, she would say, it was records more than books at that time, but I love this record, I love this album, and this is why I love it. Then another friend who would say, you're going to love this record. And at the time, and one of those people I grew closer to, and the other one I don't talk to anymore, and you can guess which. But I think there's something odd about it. It's hard enough to accurately sum up and communicate and understand your own experience with an artwork. That's difficult enough. People train for a long time to do that. People perfect the language to do that. They experiment, they succeed and fail. There's one step beyond that, which is to imagine that you can then guess at someone else's reaction to it. And this is at the most fundamental level of what reviews or recommendations do. Now, obviously people are doing that, and it's sometimes left to the secondary consumer to guess whether that person who's making the recommendation has anything useful to say to them. This is the great thing about that system. It gives everybody power, including the power not to credit that person with power. But I do think it's a problem to lose sight of how hard this is. This may have sort of been what Beth Ann was mentioning before, the difference between a review and a recommendation. The funny thing is, at this point, for books, as an author, recommendations are no worse in terms of how they help or hurt. Because in a way, a review can get naughty and dicey, and you can have this balance and the plus and the minus, and I enjoyed this character, but I didn't think the plot moved. And as you read it as a consumer, it can seem equivocal. A recommendation is fairly simple. It's on a summer reading list, like David said, or it's in the, I don't know, the approval matrix or whatever, and so you see it, and it's a binary thing. It's on or off. It's either there or not. And I think that balancing those two, since there's so many more opportunities for both of these kinds of things, is tricky. We haven't talked, I just want to remind people on the panel about the window too, the famed window of book reviewing, which is that newness is everything, or has been for some time, and this is not true online, and there are a lot of new sites that are trying to change this aggressively or more passively, and to pick something up that's 18 months old or 2 years old. In that netherworld between a classic, that's recovered because you think, oh, a new generation should discover this, and a new book, there are books 36 months old that people aren't really thinking about because they fall in the gap between those two things, but they're books the same as any other book. So that changes a little bit as well.
Do you want to respond?
I think Otis is waiting.
Sure. So I like this question a lot because I think it puts the finger on the pulse of a big problem, which is as we move into the digital age, we do need a guide to navigate the wilderness, as you said, and especially since there's so many more books, so much, as some people identified, a lot of clutter. How do you kind of figure that out? And my answer to the question of who are the experts is, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, it's not the official reviewers, it's your friends. Recommendations from friends are how I've always found books to read, and my theory in starting Goodreads was that's how most people find books to read. And maybe some of those are the mavens and listening to the real professional reviewers. But what we really need, most of us, is a system for saying, what are my friends reading, what do they like? And Goodreads is really optimized to try to solve that problem. But there's another question in there, which is how do we navigate that clutter? How do we make sense of it? And I think there's a good analogy for that, which is the World Wide Web. How did Google figure out how to help you navigate the World Wide Web? And they basically built a reputation system. They said each page gets a page rank, a weight, and it's more popular or less popular, and we'll show you the most popular ones as defined by what other sites think, how they link into them. And so as we go forward, I think the way to solve the problem of what books are most popular is to develop a similar weighting system, and that's a problem that we're excited to start tackling, especially now as we're getting more information about who's going to be followed, which book reviews are going to be followed the most on Goodreads. So that's going to be an important piece of data for us to try to develop such an algorithm.